Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank Maxon, Matthias, Heather, Dave, and any of the names that we don't know that are working behind the scenes to making this happen. Thank you so much. I'm really honored and thankful to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully my presentation is going to provide some value for everyone watching here. And yeah, thanks again for being here, and let's go on with the presentation. All right, so my name is Suarez. I'm an art director and 3D artist originally from Venezuela, but currently residing in the US. My main focus is look development, and I really enjoy working with lighting and creating a mood, as well as working on realistic texturing. I've been working on the industry for about 8 years now, and this is a quick example of just some of the clients and studios that I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with. And in 2019, I started working with MoGraph Mentor by creating a workshop on Octane and photoreal rendering, which you can actually see here on the lower left corner, as well as mentoring students. And I just finished my second session, which I did with Colin, who's an amazing artist. We were mentoring students for about 9 weeks in art direction and creating style frames. Really great opportunity to meet and help people develop their skills and careers, as well as get your own illustration version of yourself, which was very, very cool. Here's a quick look at the tools that I use daily in my work. Obviously, Cinema 4D is my daily driver, as well as Redshift render. I did start with Octane back in the day, and I started adding X particles in the last couple of years. And in the last few months, I actually incorporated Quixel tools as well, which is an amazing resource for 3D objects and materials as well. Now let's take a look at my demo reel, which should give you a better sense of the type of work that I do. Enjoy. Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't really hear your applause, but I really hope that you are applauding as if we were live in the Maxon booth. But all right. Anyways, the first project I wanted to show you is the Next 2020 conference graphics. This is a 3-day event that touches on product announcements and new business initiatives for the brand Chick-fil-A. Here's a few frames from the actual project that I helped develop. I worked with Already Been Chewed from Texas, an amazing group of people and talented guys, as we all know. I helped them with animation, lighting, and texturing. So let's take a look at the final video first. So unfortunately, there's no audio on this video, but as you can see, a lot of bright colors were used. We went for a really nice, well-lit, like kind of softbox look, and really dynamic camera animations, while still being a little bit cinematic. Yeah, this was a really fun project to work on, especially because most of my work is usually very moody and dark. So this is the scene we're going to be looking at. I'm going to be breaking down the techniques that I use to animate this, the spheres falling into the divots here. And yeah, let's just dive in. All right, so here we are in Cinema 4D, and let's quickly create the scene that we're going to be working with. We're going to have a plane, and let's grab a sphere. Let's reduce the size to 20 centimeters and just increase the size of that plane. We can quickly make a material for that sphere. And if I go into the material, we can go into the color channel and just grab a surfaces checkerboard. Just so that way we have a visual aid to make sure that this thing is rotating, and it's also, less boring than seeing at something like this. All right, so we have this now. So when we're thinking about art directing or animating a sphere rolling on a surface, the first thing that comes to mind is a spline. So let's go to the top view, and we can grab our spline pen, and let's just quickly draw a spline. And I'm actually going to change the spline mode to cubic, because I think for me that's easier to manipulate the rotations or the curvatures of the spline. And let's just go with that for now. All right, so we can go into the sphere and grab an align to spline tag and drag it into the spline, into the spline path there. And here we can see that we can, you know, very easily just control the sphere going along that spline. But the problem is that we are not seeing that sphere rotating. And if I move this up so that we are not intersecting the floor, the sphere is not rotating, and we could probably just animate that by hand, but that can get very complicated, especially if we have all of these different curves that we had in the other video. And we could also approach this via Expresso, but I didn't have the knowledge or the time to figure that out. So I wanted to have a quick and easy way and natural way to animate this. So let's delete these, and actually let's use dynamics for this. So let's right click on the sphere. We can add a rigid body tag to that, and to the plane we can add a collider body. And if I reset the PSR for that sphere, I can move it up, and if I hit play here, we can see that right now the scene is fully dynamic. So that's great. Now we need to find a way to actually use the spline so that we can move that sphere along there and still keep the dynamic part of the whole scene. So because we're using dynamics, we can actually use forces. So if we go to simulate and forces, we can add an attractor. And right now the attractor is affecting the whole scene. So we need something to concentrate the force of that attractor. And of course we can go and use fields for that. And we can use a spherical field. If you're using a previous version of Cinema 4D, this would be just a fall off, a spherical fall off. Let's just increase the fall off there a little bit. And now we can actually add the align to spline tag to the attractor and put the spline there. So we are going to be animating the attractor there. All right, great. So the next step is that we need this sphere to start right at the beginning of that spline, or where the attractor is. And a quick way to do that is selecting the sphere, going into transfer, and dragging the spherical field there. And now we have the sphere in the same place. And quick tip, right now I have these commands here docked into my layout. But if you don't know where these commands are, the easiest way to find them is just hitting Shift-C on your keyboard and then typing in the name. And another quick tip is that you can actually drag anything from this commander into your layout just like that. So now you have it docked there. So let me go just customize, double click that to remove it. All right, so great, that's all good. So that's looking good. So let's just hit play now and see what's happening. All right, so as you can see, our sphere is just flying off screen, and that is because the sphere is right in the center of that fall off where all of the force of that attractor is concentrated. So we actually need to move our attractor down a little bit so that we are affecting the sphere just you know, from the fall off and not like right in the center of the force. So let's grab our spline, and I can actually do it from here, just move it down, just so that we are still like encapsulating the sphere, but we're not actually in the center right there. And if I move my sphere up a little bit and hit play here, we can see that now our sphere is interacting with the floor nicely and it's not flying off screen. Great, so let's add some animation in for the attractor. Let's put a keyframe here for the position, and then 100% here. Let's see what we have. All right, so there's something happening, but the attractor is not really affecting the sphere or not bringing it with it. So let's go into the attractor and see what else we can edit here. And let's go into the mode and put it into force instead of acceleration. And let's check it again. There we go. So now our attractor is properly driving our sphere, but I think it's a little bit fast. So let's click on the tag here, and I can actually pause, and let's select these keyframes from here and expand them so that it's a little bit slower. And I'm actually going to hit Command D on my keyboard, and let's change the frames per second to 24. All right, so now we should have a smoother animation of that attractor and the sphere. So this is basically the technique that I use for that scene, and let's actually finish up building the rest of the scene like we had it there before. So we're gonna duplicate our sphere. We can get rid of the tag and the material again, and let's reset the PSR. And now I can hold Alt on my keyboard and click on the cloner to make it parent of that sphere. We can go into the grid array, and let's just increase the spacing. And for the sake of the presentation, I'm just going to leave it at default for these many sphere or clones. But in the final, we're going to see that I used a lot more clones for this. All right, so for making the divots in the floor, we can actually use the volume builder. And I can actually just drag my plane into here and my cloner. And if we change the mode to subtract, we should be getting, let's just add a little bit more resolution. So the lower the number, the more resolution we're going to get, because we're getting more voxels in the scene. And let's actually, right now you can see that we are still seeing the cloner there, and that's because I dragged the objects as a link. So let's actually select the plane and the cloner and add them here as a child. And there we go. Now we're not seeing those clones. So this is working great, but we are not getting that divot because we're getting just holes here, right? So, well, let me actually go to the volume builder, and right now if I change my display to hidden line, we can see that there's nothing in here because the volume builder works with voxels, which is not actually geometry. So we need to actually use the volume measure to make some geometry out of this volume builder. All right, so it went away, so it looks like we need to increase the resolution. So let's go with 2, and there we go. Now we have our plane, and if I go into another mode, we can see that this is actual geometry that we can use. Okay, so we have holes, and the way that to solve the problem of the divots is that we need some depth in that plane. So let me deactivate this. Let's go into the plane, remove the segments for that, and we don't actually need the dynamics tag, and let's just hit C on the keyboard. We're gonna go into polygon mode, select that polygon, hit D on the keyboard for my extrude, and make sure create caps it's on, and let's just extrude down so that we can create some depth in there. And now if I activate my builder and my measure, now we can see that we are getting the result that we wanted, which is a divot in there. So right now it's a little bit low resolution. So what we can do is go into a volume builder and actually increase the number or decrease the number here to get more resolution in there. But you don't want to go too crazy with these numbers to like very low, because that's going to actually create a lot of geometry. And if I go into lines here, you can see that we are creating a lot of geometry. The volume builder, it's a really great tool, but you need to really learn to optimize it. Otherwise, you get a lot of polygons like this. So we're gonna go into the volume measure, and I found that the adaptive mode works really well, even in low increments like this. I just clicked once, and you can see how much better the geometry is here. So let's go back to this, and I think what we can do is add a smooth into this so that we get a smoother surface like that, and probably not 100%, but we can do to like 60 or something like that, maybe even 45. And in the actual scene that I was working on, I rendered this in Redshift. So when it was time to render, I just added a tag to that geometry so that I could subdivide it even more at render time. All right, so that's good. And one thing that I'm noticing is that our sphere for the divots and our sphere for the animation is they're actually the same size, and our divots need to be a little bit larger. So let's go with 25. Let's wait for that to update. There we go. Okay, so now we can just click on the volume measure, and I'm gonna hit Shift-C on my keyboard and type in current state to object. Let's do that. That's gonna create a copy, and it's actually going to be geometry that I can use. So let's hide this. And now we have that geometry. So the only other thing that we need to do is right click here and add a collider tag to that. And let's quickly go to our top view, select that spline, go into point mode, and let's just edit this really quick so that the sphere has a nice path to travel and actually lands in one of the divots here. So let's start from like here. We have a nice curve going into here, and I'm just gonna add another point to edit this curve, and that's good. Let's go back to here, and as you can see, our starting position changed. So let's just quickly grab our sphere, and our spherical field is still in there. So let's just hit apply, and let's just move that sphere up. All right, and let's hit play and see what we have. So as you can see, we are actually able to control the path of that sphere and land nicely on that divot. And I'm sure that you noticed that once we land in that divot, we have this vibration here. And the solution that I found for that is really simple. We just need to go into the attractor and get it to a point where after it reaches the destination, we just need to disable it. So if I go in here and go one frame back using F on the keyboard, make a keyframe, go one frame forward and disable it and make a keyframe here. And let's go back to 0, deselect and hit play. And now we should have the sphere landing on that divot. And there's a little bit of vibration there, but you can just we can just adjust these two keyframes to disable it earlier. But this is basically how I approach the whole scene. And if we actually go into the file for that scene, we can go into look into the camera, and you can see that I have the same settings and just a bunch of different spheres, each one with a path and an attractor, and just rinse and repeat. One thing to mention though is that because I have so many spheres in here, I didn't want them to, you know, become or come very close to each other so that the attractors would, you know, cause a problem there. So the solution for that is if you go into the dynamic tag for each of the spheres, you can go into the force and change the force mode to include and just drag the appropriate attractor for that sphere. So that attractor is only affecting that sphere that you are including in this list. But that's basically it. That's how I approach this this whole scene. One of the things that I do is a lot of personal projects, and it's just a way to improve my skills and just simply explore looks and techniques without having the pressure of, you know, clients and deadlines, and honestly just to have fun. And lately I've been working a lot on automotive renderings like the one that you see here. It's just something that's really fun to me to create, and I even got inspired to create my own pack of materials for Octane renders, which you can see here. And here's a preview of the type of materials that you get with the pack. And I also just finished the Redshift version a couple of weeks ago, so you can find those two on my website if you're interested. So we're going to be taking a look at this project today, more specifically the floor and the texturing for that. I use Redshift in that, and we're going to be looking at some of the techniques that I like to use to avoid some of the patterns that you can get with texture repetition, and that actually can help you get more realistic results. So here we have the scene for the car, the automotive render, and we're going to be focusing on the floor. Really quick, we just have a huge plane in here. We have some barricades from Quixel. Totally recommend getting their subscription. And I'm actually using some of their materials here as well. So let's just fire up the Redshift render view here really quick, and I'm just going to dock it here on the side. Let's get a little bit more space, and let's hit play here, and let's go to the C cam. And this is something that I like to do when I'm working with cameras in Redshift. I like to use a prefix for the camera. So for example, if I have another camera, or if I'm starting with a scene and I'm starting with the camera number 1, I like to name it A cam. And that's just because it's easier to just hover over this menu here and just use my mouse scroll wheel to go through the different cameras right here. Sometimes if I get let's hit Shift C here, and let's get a Redshift camera. I didn't get it there, so let's go here, maybe cameras, standard. So when you're doing the default Redshift camera, it just puts it all the way down here. So just something that I like to do to quickly cycle through them. All right, so this is the scene that we have. Let me actually increase the resolution here a little bit. And again, this is a material from Quixel. So if I open the node editor here, and it's just fighting with space here, this is the basic material concrete from Quixel. So I wanted to give it a little bit more variation, maybe a little bit more of puddles in here, or like wet places. So that's what we're gonna do. So let's start by going into the node editor, and let's just get a little bit more space. Bear with me here. Okay, that should be fine. So I'm just gonna hit Shift C in the shader graph here, and let's just get a new material, and then pipe that into the surface. And I have a keyboard shortcut for that. Just select the material and hit Command D on my keyboard, and that's gonna bring it into the surface. So we can leave it pretty much at default, but let's just increase the roughness there. Great. And now we need a material blender, because we're going to blend between these two materials. So let's pipe the Quixel one into the base and the new material into layer 1, and then grab this and pipe it into the surface there. All right, so as you can see right now, we are just seeing the base material, and that's because of the blend color here for layer 1. If it's all the way down to 0, we're going to see the base. If it's all the way up to 1, we're going to see material 1. So we're actually going to use a texture to blend between these two. And if I go into my content browser, I can go into my textures, and let's just find a texture from this pack here. We're going to use the one that I used before, which is number 55. There we go. Let's just drag it in here. Go back to objects. All right, so let's use this as a blend color. So really quick, if I select my texture and hit Command D, we're gonna see it in the viewport. And right now you can see that it's pretty, there's not a lot of contrast. So we need to fix that. So we're gonna bring a ramp into here, pipe that texture into the ramp, and then pipe that into the surface. And let's just increase the contrast a little bit. So hopefully you can see where this is going. The white values are going to reveal one of the materials, and the black values are going to reveal the other one. So let's pipe this ramp into the blend, and let's take a look at that. So it looks like we need to increase it a little bit more. So hopefully you can see it there. If let's just focus on this side. Let's do a render region here and render that in there. So if I make this material something pretty obvious like red, you can clearly see how we are showing this material and, you know, blending between the two of them by using this texture. But we can actually take this a step further, and let's grab a color layer like this, and we are actually going to duplicate this setup just so that we get even more variation. And we're going to pipe this ramp into the base, and we're going to pipe this into layer color 1. And now we're going to make another blend between these two same textures, which we are using the exact same texture. So let's just really quick decrease the tiling on this one. So 1.8, and we can actually see what we're doing if I plug that into the surface. 1.8, and we can actually, let's just rotate it like 90 degrees just so that we can see a different, maybe offset it. So right now, if I select this color layer and hit Command D so I connect it to my surface, this is basically doing the same thing as the material blender, but between these two textures. So we actually need something to blend between them too. So let's grab a Maxon noise and pipe it into the layer mask, layer 1 mask. So let's focus on the noise really quick. Right now it's pretty small, so let's just make it let's just increase the size a little bit. Looks like we need to increase it quite a lot. Maybe let's go to 0.5 here, like that. And so let's control the contrast with another ramp, like that. Let's pipe this into the surface so we can focus more on that. And same thing here, just trying to find some contrast. Maybe let's use another noise, and I'm just hovering over the menu and again using my mouse scroll wheel to you know, sample all of the noises quickly. So let's grab this. Maybe this could work. We need a lot of contrast here, and it looks like, is this okay? So this one goes the other way around. Usually with the Redshift texture, going lower numbers actually increases the texture. With the Maxon noise, it works the other way around. So I think that's actually good. Maybe let's just set this to 5, and let's just see what's going on here. If I pipe this in, we can actually grab this ramp just so that we can see what we were doing and put this into red. So here we can see how we are blending between those two materials or those two textures. And we can actually increase the contrast here. There we go. And let's just come back to the ramp and make it white so we can see that there. And now we just need to pipe this into the blend and the material blender again to the surface. And let's go and make this default again. Maybe even increase the color here, just so that we get something that looks more like, you know, a little bit more like wet puddles there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's very easy to control, so I can probably just go in here and maybe increase the offset here, maybe go into like 10 so that we see a little bit less of a pattern, and that's looking pretty good to me. And I can quickly show you, we went from this material. If I let it render really quick, just let's add that there and grab the material blender. Let that resolve for a minute. And just so we can see the difference. So this is the original one, and then here we're just adding more, a little bit more interest to the floor. And one final thought here, not really related to the texturing, but I can hide that. The way that I added the rocks in the picture, here I have a rock object that I just really quickly extruded from a sphere. So we're going to put that into a cloner, again by holding Alt, making it a parent. I'm going to go into the object and make it a grid array. We can place it closer to the car like that and increase the size. Let's just change this from per step to endpoint so that we don't lose our size, and just increase the copies. We can then add a random effector to that, just so that it's a little bit more randomized. And it's just as easy as adding a collider body tag to the floor and then a rigid body to the cloner. This should be already set to apply tag to children. And let's just, let me hit save here. Just hit play and see what's going on. And if I go into the camera, we can probably go back to 0 and just move this position back a little bit, just so that we get, maybe even increase the spacing here, just so that we get more coverage. And the random effector, we can actually also randomize the scale. Go to the effector and select the min and max and just hit 0 here. Maybe -1. There we go. And also the rotation, we can just go crazy with the rotation. And you know, if you want even more variation, it's very easy to just throw up a few different variations of this rock in here. And let's just hit play here. So really quickly, hopefully you can see that some of the smaller ones are just falling through the floor, and a really quick and easy way to fix that is hitting Command D on your keyboard to go to your project settings, go into the dynamics. In the expert tab, we can just increase the steps per frame, maybe to like 18. Let's see if that helps. Maybe even more, 25. And reduce the error to like 3%. And for this scene, it's okay to go with some of the higher values, just because we're really doing just a still. And go back to the render view here, and let's quickly fire that up. Go to the CCAM, and now we're getting some more, even more variation on the floor there with the little rocks. If I let it resolve for a little bit and grab that. So we went from this original floor, added some puddles, and then added some more rocks to add even more variation to the scene. So finally, we're going to be taking a look at this project, which is part of a personal project of mine. This is just one of the many renders that I have already done, and hopefully I'll be able to release it soon. But we're going to be focusing on the texturing technique that I did on the keycaps using fields and Redshift. So let's get to it. All right, so here we have the scene for the keyboard. I obviously just left the keyboard in here and made it a little bit simpler for the presentation. But just to break down what's happening here a little bit, this is a CAD model that I found online, and all I did was I took the key switch and I put it inside a cloner just to make my life a little bit easier with that. You know, I like to use cloners whenever possible and just keep the changes to one key. So in the image, we saw that some of the keycaps have the O texture and some of them have the X texture. So we need to first grab let's go and grab the key top here. And as you can see, if I hold shift and double click on this tag, we're gonna see the UVW tag, which of course is a real mess right now. So we're going to quickly just duplicate this by holding Control and drag to the side, and let's name this top. We're going to be using this later, and we can change the projection from here. So let's grab the UV manager from here, and we can go into the top view like that. So since we're looking at the top view right now, we can go into the projection, and I actually need to go also to activate UV polygons. And this is the actual mesh that's not being cloned. We can go into the projection and say frontal. And now we have a top-down projection of the keycap, which is great. It's what we need. We can then go to optimal mapping here, and it should probably be by default on optimal. We can click realign and hit apply, and that's going to use most of the UV texture space, which is exactly what we need. Great, so we have that out of the way. Now we can go into the material now that I load it here, and let's fire up Redshift really quick. Let's set it to auto, and right now we're still on the top view, so let's go back to the perspective so it's a little bit easier to see. Nice. All right, so if we go into the shader graph, I already have the two textures loaded here, and I can just quickly pipe it into the surface. It's basically just the X and the O, and I forgot to take it from, you know, the when I was working on this. But as you can see, for the UV channel, we already have the top applied, but for the sake of the presentation, let's just delete that. And as you can see, if I imported these textures without using the UV map, this is how they would look. So this is why we changed the projection and actually created a different UVW tag. So we can select both textures now and just drag the UV tag to the UV channel, and now they are properly projected onto the surface. Great. So the next step that we need to do is actually we need to, let's connect this so Redshift doesn't get angry at me. Nice. So let's actually pause this here because we need to do some work here in the viewport with fields. So we need to have a black and white gradient between these keycaps that we can actually later use with Redshift to tell it where to apply each texture. So we already have the cloner here. What we're going to do is grab a plane effector. So I'm going to do Shift C, bring my commander, and type in plane, which brings my plane effector, which by default, of course, moves everything up. But we are not going to use the plane effector for the position, but we're going to use it for the color, which is already set to fields, which is exactly what we need. Now we need to go into the fall off and actually use one of the fields that can use a shader. So as the name correctly says, we can use the shader field. Great, so now we have a shader field in there. And from here, we can just grab a noise. And let's quickly make sure that we can see fields here. And if we go into the remap, color remap, and set it to gradient, we can start to see the gradient. If I increase the contrast, we can start to see the gradient in here. So we actually need to get since we're just doing two textures, we actually just need to get black and white, so we don't really need the gray. So we could probably just get a step interpolation between black and white, and hopefully you can see here what's happening. So right now, if we set this up, or actually let's just go and set it up right now. So if we go back to Redshift, we can take let's actually make another material, which is what we're going to use to texture the keycap, the shapes, and we actually need also a shader switch right here. And the shader switch allows you to have up to 10 different shaders if you count shader 0, and it's gonna let us use the color to drive which material is gonna apply to which keycap. So let's grab a color user data from here. We are going to use the attribute color from MoGraph, and we actually need another one called change range, which this is actually going to tell Redshift to use the data from MoGraph and actually convert it to something that Redshift can actually use. So if we connect the out to the selector, which is basically going to work as a mask, let's start Redshift, go to auto, and let's just zoom out a little bit. There we go. So let's see this material here right now really quick. So let's just make it a hot pink like we had in the preview, and maybe just reduce the reflection and let's just increase the roughness like that. Doesn't need to be perfect for now. Let's use GGX. All right. Cool. So now we need to use the shader switch as a switch for a material blender. So if we get into the material blender, we are going to blend between this base and this material, which is going to go into layer color 1. And then the shader switch is going to go into the blend color. So we're basically using the switch to blend between these two colors. And for the switch, we are actually going to use the textures. So shader 0 is going to be this texture, and shader 1 is going to be this texture. So let's connect the material blender to the surface and see what we get. All right, so it's doing what we need. And as you can see, we're getting one texture on the top and another texture on the bottom. Obviously right now it's inverted, so we just need to change the order here. So this one is going to be shader 0. Did I do it right? Let's try shader 0 and shader 1. Oh, I think it's because we are not pulling the alpha from these textures. So let's grab a color splitter and let's pipe in the input here, and let's just use the alpha. There we go. And then same for this one, and use the alpha on shader 1. There we go. So now it's doing what it's supposed to. Let's just quickly change this to a more appealing pink, maybe. Yeah, it looks good to me. Maybe more reflection there. So now we can just adjust the shader field here to get the actual pattern that we need. So let's go into the shader field, and for the noise we can grab maybe a cell noise, because we want to we want to use pretty much the same size of the keycaps that we have here. And I know, of course, from testing this or from making this scene, that the value that we're going to use here is 20%. And you can see immediately that we are getting the pattern that we needed. So the O's on this keycap, and then this one, and then that one. And of course, I had to play with the settings a little bit just to get the actual pattern that I needed. But this is a technique, just using a shader field to be able to switch between materials and actually just keep everything organized with just one single material in here. All right, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. Hopefully you found some of the techniques here valuable. Here's where you can find me on social media, on my website as well, and my YouTube channel, where I post some tutorials, quick tips, and also some blogs. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.